In 1997, Japanese publisher Koei expanded their strategy war series Romance of the Three Kingdoms to here in the West, but did so by going with a more action-orientated approach. This would begin the Dynasty Warriors series, developed by Koei studio OYNASTY. This is one of my guilty pleasure series, games that have you playing as super powerful generals based upon real historical generals, and you just mow down armies of enemies and enjoy a vast narrative retelling the events surrounding the Three Kingdoms era of ancient China, a war between three factions of Shu, Wei and Wu. Today, in celebration of the recent Dynasty Warriors movie release on Netflix, I thought I'd give you my take on the franchise, on what's my least favourite all the way up to my most favourite. Just as a heads up though before we begin, I'm only going to be including the main 9 games and 2 spin-offs that I've played. There'll be no Tactics or Empires games here, none of the PSP games as I haven't played those, or the Extreme Legends expansions, they're just going to be counted as just expansions. As a final quick note, I enjoy all these games. I think all 11 of them have certain qualities and fun gameplay. This ranking is just my ranking. Let me know your favourite Dynasty Warriors games in the comments below. Without further delay, this is Dynasty Warriors, ranked and reviewed. Enjoy. So I have a confession to make. I actually quite enjoyed my time playing Dynasty Warriors 9 when it released. However, that doesn't make it any better than the bottom of this list. At 11th spot is Dynasty Warriors 9, the first game in the franchise to be open world, giving you a humongous ancient China to explore, and it is filled with landmarks and side quests and a lot of hacking and slashing. But no matter how large of an open world you have, if there's no life to it, no meat on the bones, then it will fail to be something that will hold your attention for very long. 9's open world is pretty much just an insanely large level from any of the previous games because there's not many NPCs just going about their daily lives. There's no officers out fishing or getting drunk at a bar, there's no soldiers set on patrol routes around the different towns. It's just constantly enemies again and again, stood waiting in clusters for you to come by and fight them, and after a while it gets very repetitious. Dynasty Warriors 9 also has an abundance of mainstay characters with different weapons, such as Zhong Hei's claws, and even worse is some of this content has now been cut off into DLC. The story is also poor effort, with in-between chapters filled with text boxes and so much expositional dialogue you could fall asleep to it. Dynasty Warriors 9, a game that I fairly enjoyed in my first few hours, soon deteriorated into a buggy, shallow, repetitive open world take on the franchise. It had way too much busy work content in one of the most bland open worlds in all of gaming history. I massively respect OYNASTY for trying something new, but this just wasn't it. Kicking off the top 10, we have the first ever hack and slash Warriors game, Dynasty Warriors 2. This was a huge change up from the first Dynasty Warriors on the original PlayStation, setting the stage for the 1 versus 1,000 series, and hack and slashes in general. Square is your light attack, triangle is a heavy attack, circle is your special move, and L1 is block. And this has become a mainstay in not just Warriors games, but hack and slashes in general. You also have just 2 modes, the story mode and a free mode to replay stages with any officer you choose. While it may seem simple today, back then this was quite revolutionary. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any higher on the list because this game today feels so aged. Its combat mechanics and animations are really outdated, its horse and bow combat are barely playable, and its fog-choked maps do not hold up. its health regen spamming AI is also really annoying to battle against. Dynasty Warriors 2 was undoubtedly an impressive PS2 launch title, and a fantastic step of evolution for the series and hack and slash genre, but lacking a ton in terms of its mechanics, its 2 modes of play, bare bones story, its 0 extras or bonus features, and even lack of split screen multiplayer. At 9th position we have Dynasty Warriors 6. This was Koei taking the series into new territory. They wanted to revamp the combat, and it would also be the first game in the series on the next generation HD PlayStation 3. With the new hardware, 6 was able to be the best looking game in the series at the time, with a new engine that came with improved lighting, larger maps, more vibrant colours, and tons more enemies on screen at once. Where 6 falters is in its repetitive new combat system, which ditches the simple but effective light and heavy square and triangle combo systems of the previous games. It ditches secret weapons, it ditches some character specific weapons of the past, making a lot of characters now sharing weapons with other characters, which has since become known as clone characters. It also ditches some previous mainstay characters and doesn't add any new characters to the series, making it the only mainline Dynasty Warriors with 0 new playable officers. I do have to give 6 some credit for letting you call your horse from any point on the map, having some actually standout redesigns for a few characters, and letting you for the first time being able to control the camera. But with barely any new content, poor new combat choices, and butchering of some of the characters that they didn't decide to leave out, Dynasty Warriors 6 was a looker, but dropped in the content and quality department. In at 8th place is Dynasty Warriors Strikeforce. This was a spin-off developed using the Dynasty Warriors 6 engine. It tried to tell an even less historically accurate version of the story by letting your generals transform into these special rage modes in place of your usual special Muso attack with circle. Personally, I wasn't too impressed by Strikeforce. It's most definitely a really fun game the more you level up your characters, but to me it also feels a bit like a cash-in, with it not featuring any modes outside of the campaign, no new characters, and even the selling point was merely a gimmick to stick in trailers. Strikeforce could certainly have just been an add-on to Dynasty Warriors 6. The better part of Strikeforce is certainly in its RPG mechanics that it includes, such as crafting weapons, learning new abilities, and upgrading your little hub camp. It also introduced a weapon switching mechanic, which gave all characters now 2 weapons each, and the ability to command your AI teammates, but like most of this game, these faint extras felt pretty tacked on and underdeveloped. Strikeforce was just another Dynasty Warriors game at the time of its release, which tried to grasp at a few neat ideas but couldn't quite keep its grip. At 7th place is the original Dynasty Warriors for the PlayStation 1. This game is totally different to the rest of the series, due to it being a one-on-one weapons-based fighting game similar to Soul Calibur. Personally, I don't think it's too bad. You have 2 attack buttons and 2 for parrying, which can lend well into strategizing your attacks instead of simple button mashing like a few of the hack and slash games. But the combat wasn't the most finely tuned, requiring some pristine parrying times, and the backgrounds and stage designs showed off how cheap this game was. Dynasty Warriors is a fairly cheap and tiresome fighter that had tough competition at the time, but a competent and fun fighting game nonetheless. In at 6th spot is what I considered one of the underrated games in the series, Dynasty Warriors Next, that released for the PS Vita. I say it's underrated because for the most part this is your solid console hack and slash experience, developed really well for the handheld. While there isn't any free mode, which is a huge shame considering the game's portability, we do still get a story mode and a tactical conquest mode which lets you create your own general and fight over territory of ancient China. The story mode is fairly bare bones, but what I like about Next are the battles themselves. Next introduces bases, and capturing the bases along the maps gifts your army with different properties, such as stronger weapons, higher defense, or archers, etc. This gave the battles a slighter strategic feel, with deciding which bases to go for first. Unfortunately, with it being a Vita launch title, they just had to throw in lots of touchscreen features. Some, like tapping commanders to give them orders, or being able to resize the map via the touchscreen, are great features. It's a shame they didn't stop there though. We've got lots of tapping the screen minigames, more tapping the screen minigames, using the motion controls and tapping the screen minigames at the same time, and all the officer boss battles are now reduced to tapping the screen minigames. And it's frustrating and it sucks all the fun out of the battles when you just want to play a classic Dynasty Warriors game.
Beyond the end!
Dynasty Warriors 2 was a good new start for the series, but was in need of much improvement. Thankfully, Omega Force delivered, and Dynasty Warriors 3 had much more crisper textures, more polygons for its characters, more enemies on screen, and split screen multiplayer. My problem with Dynasty Warriors 3 is this. Personally, there's two things that make me fall in love with the Warriors franchise: the combat and the story and characters. Dynasty Warriors 3 butchers the story side for me. I don't recommend this game for newcomers. With 3 you get poor pronunciation, laughably bad voice acting, and cringe-worthy dialogue that in some cases can shatter some characters' intimidation and personalities.
Feel the power of my magic!
Dynasty Warriors 3 wasn't a bad entry by any means. In fact, it improved upon 2 so much that you could get hours and hours of fun out of this game. It had a quality soundtrack, and it added a ton of new characters and the Nanman campaign. However, its combat still feels quite aged today, with no camera controls and rigid mechanics, and its take on the story and characters might just be one of the worst renditions of it in the franchise. At number 4 is the game that took Dynasty Warriors back to its roots after Dynasty Warriors 6, Dynasty Warriors 7. This game had so much potential and truly delivered. We had a solid combat system with stylish new EX attacks, and one of the best story modes in the entire series, which takes it above Dynasty Warriors 3 for me. The story mode had seamless transitions from cutscenes to gameplay, fantastic pacing, strong character development, and 4 campaigns following each faction. Yes, I said 4, as 7 also introduces a brand new faction into the franchise, the Jin Empire, which comes with a cast of new refreshing characters. But Dynasty Warriors 7 still couldn't quite reach the heights of the PS2 days. It lacked in variety, with no free mode in the vanilla version, and the new Conquest mode was lacking much substance, feeling very rushed in at the last minute. Many of the casts still felt like clones of each other, like in Dynasty Warriors 6, and the weapon switching mechanic borrowed from Strikeforce didn't help shift this feeling. Dynasty Warriors 7 had a brilliant story mode and still is a decent entry for newcomers. It even added a brand new faction. However, it also left behind so much, like a free mode, unique characters that all felt and played differently, running charge attacks, aerial charge attacks, even some animations, that it sometimes felt like an unfinished shell compared to the later PS2 entries. When making this list, it was certainly difficult to judge the top 3. All of these next games could really be placed in just about any order, but for me, I'm sticking at 3rd place, Dynasty Warriors 4. This was my introduction into the series, playing it around when I first got my PlayStation 2, being yet more of an upgrade over Dynasty Warriors 3's gameplay mechanics and graphical style. I also liked Omega Force's new direction it was heading with 4's new take on its story mode, as for the first time in the series having separate campaigns for each faction and splicing in some what-if scenarios depending on if certain characters escape the levels during the game. It still wasn't as deep as it could have been, but a huge improvement over Dynasty Warriors 2 and 3. You could even create your own custom character and have them appear within the story mode. Dynasty Warriors 4 wasn't a ton more, but what it did improve makes it one of the best Dynasty Warriors games to go back to today. At second place is none other than Dynasty Warriors 5. This was a rock solid hack and slasher when it released, featuring a grand selection of playable characters, an electric soundtrack, and an even more finely tuned combat system. One of my personal grievances of Dynasty Warriors 2 and 3 was the lacking story mode. Dynasty Warriors 5 isn't going to win Oscars, but the acting was much improved from Dynasty Warriors 2 and 3, and 5's story had you go through each playable character's history during that time period, rather than it just be a string of levels for each faction like in Dynasty Warriors 4. 5's individuality had you connect more strongly to the characters, and was the first time in the series that I could actually find my favourites. Dynasty Warriors 5 was a fantastic game and truly one of the best Warriors games of all time. But coming in at first place for me is Dynasty Warriors 8, or more specifically, Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends Complete Edition, which is the version that I played and the one that I recommend. 8 is another fun as hell hack and slasher, but does a great job in deepening the combat mechanics that little more. You've got 80 plus playable officers, all now with their own weapons, each with 2 EX attacks and 3 different Musou special moves. Dynasty Warriors 8 deepens the weapon switching mechanic, which had become a mainstay since Strikeforce, by creating a rock paper scissors feature in which all weapons and enemy generals have one of 3 affinities attached to them, and if you have a weapon with the advantageous affinity, you're going to do more damage to their enemy, or the opposite if you have the disadvantageous affinity. It doesn't make the combat much deeper, but it certainly had me enjoy the weapon switching mechanic a lot more than in 7 and in Strikeforce, as I felt like I actually had reason to be switching to other weapons. The best thing is the AI now has the ability to switch weapons too, having you think a little more on the battlefield. 8 Complete Edition is also bursting with content, split screen modes, ambition mode which has you building your own little empire, challenge modes, and the classic story mode. I'll say the story mode isn't as in depth as 7's, but its decision to only allowing you to play as officers important to the specific battles is a welcome addition, in making your experience feel much more historically accurate. Complete Edition on PS4 and Vita also adds in a full campaign covering the life of Lu Bu, and it's an epic addition. Dynasty Warriors 8 is the best the series has been thus far, and deserving of my 8 out of 10 score. And so that is my thoughts on all 9 Dynasty Warriors games and the Strikeforce and next spin-offs. What are your thoughts on the Dynasty Warriors franchise? Do you enjoy these games? Do you see them as guilty pleasures? What are your favourite ones? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care and adios.
Lu Bu!